We'll do quick introductions. We're both called Tom, which makes it quite easy. Not to confuse each other. My name's Tom Watson. I'm a freelance consultant. Work with lots of voluntary community organisations. Do a fair bit around data. Tom, other Tom, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm other Tom, otherwise known as Tom French, based in Sheffield. Similar to other Tom in that I'm a freelance consultant.
My name's Tom Watson. I'm a freelance consultant.
That was interesting. Have you got another hop?
It's gone. It's gone.
It's gone. Fine. So yeah, I'm Tom French, based up in Sheffield, similar to Tom Watson in that I'm a freelance consultant, working primarily with community groups, charities, a bit of public sector around data and research and evaluation, but also run a thing called Sheffield Data4Good. That's me.
Super. So today we're basically going to talk a little bit about, we've kind of cheekily titled it, How to CRM. Basically, we, I can't see any of the chats, but I don't know what's happening. We built probably about just before Christmas. Yes, anyway, sorry, just getting confused with the chat. Back in December, I think it was, November 2020, myself and Tom got together, just basically having a bit of a chat about CRMs and kind of the things that we were coming across. We both work with lots of voluntary organisations, and we quite often came up against this challenge of organisations having trouble with CRMs. Can't see the Mentimeter. Yes. Bear with me. Tom, do you want to just take over for a second while I drop in the
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Tom and I had a number of conversations, primarily stemming from a lot of the groups and charities we worked with, talking about their approach to CRM, some of the struggles they had with pre-existing things that were out there, both in terms of things like cost and the way the data is structured and whether it was fit for their specific needs and things like that. And Tom and I wondered whether it would be possible to use a free-to-use no-code thing to make one from scratch, really, and to share it and see whether people could find use cases for it as a starting point. And I think we really set out not as a view to kind of taking over the CRM market, but really just to make a tool that could help or support people to think about CRM stuff and define their needs as much as anything else. So even if it was just a way of going, this is the kind of stuff we want, the data we want to collect, and we want it linked in this kind of way, that was really our starting point.
So we got together. We spent a bit of a day just kind of throwing a few ideas together around how could we make a bit of a lightweight CRM in Airtable, and we'll talk a little bit about why we used Airtable in a moment. But basically what we're going to do today is kind of do a bit of a Blue Peter version of going through that from start to finish. We're going to just show you what Airtable is. We're going to show you starting how we put a few of those bits together. We'll show you the final version. We'll give you an opportunity to copy it and use it if you want to, and we'll answer some questions about it. So it'll be a bit of a run through. We'll probably be saying here's one we made earlier quite often and handing over to my assistant. But basically, Tom is going to be inputting things as we're talking, so it's kind of a live demo. So just, I suppose, let's get into it, Tom, I guess. So Tom's going to share a screen. I'm going to talk over the top of bits of it. And so hopefully, if we bring it up, this is it. So what Tom's just brought up there is Airtable. If I've just looked at the Mentimeter, people generally have kind of voted that they probably have a bit of a CRM. It's okay. A couple of people have voted that their CRM is amazing. So I want to talk to those people at some point to find out what are you using. Airtable, a lot of people said they hadn't used it before. Airtable is, as Tom said before, is a bit of a low code tool, and low code generally means that you don't need to be a programmer to get to grips with it. So it has a good front end. It means you can generally use it. It's quite visual. And what it is a kind of cross between probably a collection of spreadsheets and a bit of a database. And it allows you to create things quite simply for collecting data in a really structured way. If you were to go to Airtable and sign up and just start a base, and a base is a project, for want of a better term, this is what you would see. At the top, I've just put how to CRM, and you get one table. Now, where Tom's hovering, it's the table name. And then you'll see a selection of kind of fields as well. So what Tom's going to do is just literally start to begin to add some table names, because that's where we're going to start. We want to understand what tables we're going to use. And you could start to think about these if you're used to Excel or something like that, or Google Sheets, just a series of sheet names, for want of a better term. It's a bit too blurry. Don't worry too much about kind of seeing the detail of this. We will share with you the link so you can see it yourself afterwards. And basically, all Tom's doing there is he's adding a series of table headers, and basically the table headers we've used within this lightweight CRM is projects with the first one, people, partners, activities, and we've also got audiences, funding, we've got outcomes and consent type as the things that we've used. So all Tom's doing there is literally really simply creating some empty tables with some empty fields in, and what he's done is just adding some table names. And that's just your starting point. That's where we started. The starting point for us was literally, what are the kind of things we might want to see within a lightweight CRM? Because one of the challenges that you have with CRMs quite often is understanding what are the things we're looking for, what are the things that we want to know, what is the data we're going to collect. Now, when you first start with something like this, you probably want to gather everything. You want to say, we need to know everything. We need to know everything. And actually, that can be really challenging and probably not that useful. So understanding what's the minimum amount you need to collect to show that what you're doing is good or to be useful. Because the less you collect, the more likely you are to actually collect it regularly and fill things in. Tom, do you want to give any insight into kind of just why we chose those tables and what table headings we used?
Yeah, I think so. I think for us, again, it was just to really focus in on things that made sense to you as things like we don't necessarily have to absorb other people's definitions of things with a CRM. So what are the kind of things we deal with on a day-to-day basis? We do some projects, we work with some partners to do those projects, and people interact with those projects, and there are people in partners, but we don't need to worry about the separation there. So just really thinking about kind of different things that we interact with on a daily basis, whether it's funding or activities, and that's kind of how we approach those different tabs, really.
Yeah. And so basically that was our starting point. We set a series of tables, and then as you see in each table you've got, well, if you can see, it's a little bit blurry for those on a small screen. Within each of the tables you've got a kind of series of fields. And so basically these would be like your field headings in Excel. The really interesting thing, and as Tom's doing, he's just renaming them. Really simply, you can rename and add different fields within Airtable really simply. You can create different types of fields as well. So you can use text fields, you can use tick boxes, you can use dates, you can use multi drop-down, single select fields as well. So what Airtable does is allows you to structure data really simply. So rather than just, with an Excel spreadsheet where everything just kind of gets piled in, what Airtable allows you to do is set some specific structures for types of data you might want to do. So what Tom's doing here is he's doing a little single select field. What that allows you to do is fill in some types of data that you might want to collect and allow users, when you're inputting it, to select only one of those. So in this case, Tom's kind of adding in a volunteer, are they a member of staff, are they a community member? Now all that does is means when we get into adding data later on, it means people can only add those options. One of the challenges with, I think there's been some conversation today about structured versus unstructured data. When we're collecting some of this data, what we're trying to do is mean that we can have some structure behind it. We want to know whether somebody is a volunteer or whether they're a staff member or whether they're part of a community. With a free text where we just fill it in, there can be spelling mistakes. People can input things a little bit differently. You might describe things slightly differently. If you set the single select, you can actually just say, okay, we only want people to be able to choose from one of these 5 things. And again, the reason we did this in Airtable rather than a specific coded program or a specific CRM is this is adaptable. And we'll keep saying this again and again. This is a template. This is a starting point for organizations, for small organizations generally, to get going, because it won't be perfect for everybody. But what we can do is give you a starting point, and then people can just adapt it. If you don't call anybody volunteers, if you don't call people service users and you have a different name, change it, but it gives you that option. So Tom, I don't know if you want to jump onto kind of the here's one we prepared earlier. And so this is our Blue Peter version 1. So within that, what we did was we have all of the tables, table names, same table names, projects, people, partners, and funders. And all we did was we filled in each of those tables with a number of different fields. So for the projects one, we have a project name, we have a description, we have funders and a status and activities and events. As well, we've got outcomes, we've got start dates, we've got a few other ones in there. Now, there's a few things that we want to talk about specifically within this. One of the powerful things around Airtable is it's a relational tool. So what that means is that some of the things we did was create links between the tables. That's where Airtable gets powerful. You can just create a series of tables and structure your data that way. It is actually quite nice, and you can pull data in and just use it in a single-use table. But where it gets really powerful is the links between the tables. So that's what we did. We put some the fields in. Now, Tom, if you jump into the final version where we've got some dummy data in. So we put some dummy data in within this. We added some people, we added some projects, we added some partners and funders. And Tom, if you go to projects again, so if you look in projects, we added the project name. If you can see in the third column along, there's something called funders. And that is part of a relational link to one of the other tables, which is partners and funders. So within partners and funders, we have a list of them. We have a regional funder, a national funder, a community foundation, a local partner. And what it means is in projects, you can choose who's funding it. And it means that you keep the data slightly separately in separate tables, but you can link them. And it means you can pull data through from one table to another without actually corrupting any of the data from each of the different tables. So one of the things that can quite often happen in, if you're using a lot of spreadsheets, I say this quite a lot, using a lot of spreadsheets and you have you're pulling data through and you're using a lot of formulas to pull data from one spreadsheet to another spreadsheet. A formula might get corrupted. You're not quite sure where the corruption is, and data can get really, really messy. In this way, you keep things in the nice little tables, but you can link them beside each other. So that was one of the really powerful things about Airtable is that relational side of things, keeping things slightly separate, but allowing them to be linked. And within each of these, we've got relationships. So there's relationships between projects and funders. There's relationships between activities, events, and projects, activities, events, and people. And so each of these allows us to kind of be working through and adding data as we're going through, as we're working. So Tom's hovering there over activities and events. So as he adds, you might want to just add an event there, Tom.
This is where my permissions run out, Tom.
No, don't worry about that. So we have a series of events there, and you can select a different status. You can select the type of it, and the type again links to outcomes, etc. And so you can add something there. You can have a start date, an end date of these things, and you can have some geospatial data. So you can add postcodes, for instance, in that. There's some great things you can do with all of this, even within Airtable. But where it is really powerful is you can pull it out of Airtable and maybe use some of the learning from some of the earlier sessions around kind of showing that, visualizing that data. But where Airtable is really useful is in the collection stage, and then just the little bit of manipulation. So Tom, going to kind of talk a little bit around views at this point. So what we've done so far is just talk about the basic structure of Airtable, the basic structure that we've put together. And now we're just going to talk about where it gets a little bit more powerful, which is in different views. So I'm going to hand over to Tom.
Thanks, Tom. So far we've kind of seen everything in a grid view, as Airtable calls it, which is a bit like the spreadsheet version. But what you can also do is once you've got that structure set up, all the stuff linked in, you can make it look different, basically, but based on the same data. So something that's really simple, for example, is a gallery view, which will take each row of the grid view and turn it into a bit more like an interface like this. So you can then click on a record and see it like this. Let's find something a bit more interesting like projects. So again, we've got a grid view here, but we can see it differently as cards like this. Or you can set up something called a Kanban view, which takes one of these fields where it's got predefined options in it, and you can organize it that way. So for example, here are the projects, but organized under lists of this stage, what stage they're at. And again, you can click through to a project and see the record that way. And all of this is, I haven't quite got the permissions on this one, but I'll just show you actually back on here how you add a view. Literally, when you're setting up your grid view, you'll see a job lot of options down in your bottom left-hand corner, like calendar view, gallery view, or Kanban view. And as Tom says, we'll in a second give everybody a chance to copy this and have a good play with it from that point of view. So that's projects. Going back to the activities view, because we have things like dates involved in this, we can have a calendar view. So again, you just add the view on top of that, and you can see that you've got a calendar there and where all your events are happening. And again, it's just another way to interact with the same information that's sitting within the database. And you can add as many of these different views as you want. So you'll see here there's two ones with a little green icon. That's the Kanban view, and it's just different ways of getting things organized based on the data fields you've already got in there. So it's an extra layer of power that Airtable has that perhaps a regular spreadsheet or a Google Sheet or whatever your spreadsheet format of choice is. It's quite nice having that in there, and you don't need very much code to get to grips with all of that. There's also a form view that I don't think works with this for me because of the permissions, but you can just create forms that give a nice user-friendly interface to input data as well. And there's lots of powerful things you can do with the forms and make those public alone, whilst you keep the view of the data behind, or whatever it is you need to do for your own privacy purposes or openness purposes, if that's the case. Back over to you, Tom.
Yeah, and I think the forms thing is really again quite helpful. You know, if you use Google Sheets, you'll be aware of kind of setting up a form, send it out, and then sending the data directly into Google Sheets. This just allows you to build the grid view. So what do you want? What do you want to collect? And then it automatically kind of builds a form from that, which then, as Tom said, you can share. You can do certain permissions with it, but it goes directly back into your Airtable. The other thing that's really quite powerful, I don't know if you can go into partners and funders, Tom.
Yeah.
Partners and funders tab. I don't know if you can see on the left-hand side, we've got funders and partners as two separate grids, and all that is it's a filtered view, and it just allows you to see things that are only funders or things that are only partners. You can set that filter, and it just means that if there's something you do regularly, so you want to look at, for instance, just volunteers or just people who've attended certain events or whatever it is, if you do something quite regularly, you can set up views specifically to do that and just keep them there. And again, you're not messing with the data. It's not changing the data at all. It's just keeping a specific filter for you in place that you can look at. So that's why it's really powerful in kind of just having that quick look at kind of slicing data. So you might want to slice it by, as I said, type of activity. You might want to slice it by audiences. Might want to slice it by projects. So if you go into projects, Tom, again, you could say, I want to slice it by the type of organization that funds it, which funder funds which organization project, and you can filter it that way. So it just allows you to have specific views for things really, really quite simply. And I think that's, again, quite a powerful use of keeping your data particularly structured, but then allowing you to have different looks at it. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of what we did when we pulled Airtable together. What I'm going to do now is just throw into the chat is where you can basically get this. So what we did was we took it and we put it on the Airtable universe, and literally if you click that link, Tom, I don't know if you want to just click. Can you click that link and just show what they should be seeing?
Yeah, one sec.
Put them on the spot now.
Can't expect me to think, talk, and type at the same time.
No, I know. Somebody else in the chat, thanks Michelle, just saying that they've used Airtable themselves for the Democracy Handbook, so you can have a look at theirs. So if you were to click that link that I've put in there, you'll see this is something called the Airtable Universe. Basically, within Airtable Universe, it's just a whole load of people who've created different uses for Airtable. There's a whole load of them in there. You can search through. There's everything from kind of timekeeping to events tracking. Loads of templates already in there. We have that template in there. You can take it. You can look at it, and then where Tom's hovering, there's a button which just says copy base. And if you click that and you click copy base, that would take it into your own Airtable account. Now, you do have to sign up for an Airtable account. We don't work for Airtable. We're not selling you Airtable. If you sign up for it, it is free. So Airtable is free up to a certain level, and I would say that up to a certain level, certain number of records, it is free. Beyond that, it starts to cost around about, I think it's about $12 a month or something like that. So what it gives you is an opportunity to try it out, play with it, scale. You know, if it starts to work for you and you start to think, oh, we're really into this and we're using it a lot, you can add, you can start to pay for it because it's actually worthwhile. But if you just use it, get to figure out kind of what you're using, why you want to use something, what CRM works for you, what information you really want to know, then it gives you an opportunity to try that out. So what we've kind of suggested now is, if you are interested, we've put that link in there, is people to just literally take 5 minutes, and if you want to have a go, grab it. If you're having troubles or you're not figuring out where to get to, or you're not figuring out how to do it, pop it in the chat. We'll try and talk you through it. Then we'll ask, do some Q&A, and then we'll see where we get to. So basically, take 5 minutes, have a go and have a quick play with Airtable, see where you get to. If you struggle, throw it in the chat, and we'll try and talk you through it.
And loving all the additional uses of Airtable as well. There are a lot of things you can plug it in with as well. So please keep those examples coming too. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And just to reiterate, it wasn't, I don't think we developed it just with a view to people going, this is a ready-made CRM. I think we really felt like it was also an opportunity for people to inexpensively play around with requirements, actually, in a way that was kind of low risk, and didn't mean that you had to dismantle what you had already or do anything like that. But as a way of kind of getting your hands dirty in the data to kind of spec out what you might need and go, what if we could get this bit of information? What could we do with it? What could we say as a result? And how might that shape how we deliver projects or whatever? That seemed like an interesting thing, which is why we did it, I suppose. Yeah,
just while you're having a bit of a play with that, one of the things we did was we literally built this, and then we kind of threw it out there and said, you know, if you're interested, have a look, have a play, and you know, if you're struggling with this, if this is your first ever foray into kind of not even just Airtable, CRMs in many ways, have a go, and then drop us a line, and me and Tom will have a quick, an hour chat with you to see if it's something that could be quite helpful. And we've had, how many people we chatted to so far, Tom? About 5, 6, 7?
5 or 6, couple more. I mean, we still keep getting from somewhere. Somebody keeps getting in touch occasionally.
And so, people just kind of drop us a line and say, we're trying to do this. We talk them through a little bit about what they do, and they, people are kind of taking it and adapting it and using it, or trying it and finding it's not what they particularly need, but at least they know. And I think, as Tom said, one of the major things that we were looking to do was allow people to try this, to play with it, to understand what data they want, knowing that it's not going to cost them thousands of pounds to build a CRM, which then doesn't get used or isn't set right. And actually, one of the things that I think me and Tom have both come across is organizations who decide they really need a CRM. They bring in some external consultants who might be brilliant, but if you're not clear about what you actually want from that CRM, then it doesn't matter what your system you use, it can always be a bit useless. So this is a way of just really playing with what are the types of data we want, how do we want it displayed, what's useful for us, and what's useful for people out in the field. So, do we need forms in a certain way? Do we need to collect data regularly? at every session, how do you want to structure that? So this is a way of basically just playing with that. And that's what we did. So we're basically just throwing it out there, chatting to lots of people. So again, you know, if we if you're interested, our emails are on the link that we shared. You can email us and say, can we have an hour of your time? We're quite generally generous people, although there are 250 people on this thing, so hopefully not everybody asked for an hour of our time. So anyway, we've got a few things in the chat, so we'll just go through that, and then we might jump into the Q&A, Tom.
Yeah, there's quite a lot going on actually. So there's a couple in the chat. So as people are playing with it in the back, I'm assuming people are playing with it in the background. Please feel free to carry on doing that. I'm just going to talk about some of the pros that are coming. Sorry, some of the questions that are coming through. So one of the questions is about tracking attendance.
Yep. It's Tom.
Again.
Oh, there you are.
Did I cut out then, Tom?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Just going back to the question about tracking attendance. We think we've dealt with that. 1 second, let me show you again. So this was something we wanted to think about. So when you set up an event or an activity, you can add, if you've had people that you engage with on a regular basis in here, so you've got people that come along to your things. Once they're in there, and you set up a new activity here, you will be able to add people. Again, it's not going to work brilliantly on here. Do you want to share it from your side, Tom?
Yeah, 100.
Yeah, I can actually show that, because I think there's a couple of questions about setting up relationships as well, which will look better from your side. Just while you're doing that, there's a couple of questions as well about dashboards and visuals. It does have some inbuilt visuals. They're not the best, I wouldn't say, but certainly for starting points, there are certain things you can set up. What do they call them again? Blocks, I believe, is the terminology in Airtable.
Yeah. So within Airtables, that's when you start to get slightly more. You have to start paying for things. So again, you can start paying for blocks, and basically you can have. I can show you that actually, because I do pay for it. Over here, can you see that, Tom? I'm kind of playing with Airtable. So is that coming up?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So here on the right hand side, you've got blocks, and you can basically add kind of charts.
We've just been corrected. It's been renamed to apps.
Yes, it has been renamed to apps. Sorry. You can start to add some charts. You can add a whole range of different apps, and they're always kind of getting built up as they go. And so basically, you can have that's just basically a number of active groups that you can create some charts. It does allow you to do pivot tables, etc. What I would say is, if you really want to visualize things nicely, there's better tools out there. I think it was Oliver was on earlier on, and he was talking about lots of data viz tools like Flourish, like Tableau, like others like that. And I think for me, they're better. That's what they're built for. This is very much around how to get the data and structure it. It does simple things, and for most things, it's probably enough. But if you really want to start exploring visualization externally, internally, probably go with others, I would say. What Tom was talking about there earlier on was just basically you can add people to activities. So you can basically add somebody to activity, which means that they show up basically whenever you were to filter that, or you could track how many people came to an event. You can put something simple in, like just a number of people who attended the event. You can do that, but it's better to have the people in there. And what that also does is means that in the people table, you can see the activities and events that they went to. So you can kind of look at individual people and say, which events did they go to? And that's also quite helpful because those projects and the people are linked.
Yeah. Sorry, Tom, I'm going to ask you to go back in there if that's all right.
Yeah.
There's a couple of questions about or requests to show how you would set up the links. So that the thing you've just shown shows how you can select things from link tables, but can you just show setting up a field and how you would choose the right type of field to link it to another record?
Yes, I'll go back in. So I'll just add something in here. So basically, as Tom was doing earlier on, was just adding a field. And you have a whole selection of different things you can do here. But at the top, you have something called link to another field. And basically, that just allows you to link to, when you click that, you have a list of the tables you want to link to. So what am I in now? People. I'm going to link to activities and events. When you click that, you create a field, and it'll allow you to do lookup fields. So I mentioned earlier on about kind of lots of spreadsheets. You know, if you've ever used the lookup function within Excel or Google Sheets, you'll be kind of familiar with how that kind of terminology of looking things up. In this way, it allows you to look up different fields from different events, from different tables. So you can select which ones you want to link between different tables. So all I'm doing is adding different fields. What that does is kind of add some along there. So it adds a lookup field, and basically I can kind of pull data through from a different event. And then you'll see it kind of self-populated as it went along. So pull through the postcode, which people, how many people, and the kind of name of it.
Thanks, Tom.
No problems.
Before you escape that, can you just show, some people have asked how you can easily export the data in the CSV file.
Yes.
And whilst you're just setting that up, the first question we had was about using Airtable with personal data and GDPR regulations. So we're being quite open with this, but when you set up an Airtable, you can be much more closed. It doesn't have to be a public thing. So for starters, you can have restricted users, and you add them like you would with any other kind of like document management thing, I guess. So you add people specifically and give them specific roles. So you are, from a GDPR perspective, keeping that data private. You can also have different views available for different people. So you might have 2 or 3 people that you want to access personal data, but you might want some other people just to see a summary of the data. It is possible to set up those permissions. Just because we're being open with it does not mean that's a default function of it. So you can be quite, you can close it off from other people. Yeah,
so you can allow, very simply, you can kind of allow people only with a certain kind of email address. And I don't mean specific email address, kind of, if it's your organizational email address to access it, and with a password, so you can do that. And as Tom said, you can just have views that you only share to certain people, which is the kind of collated view, which doesn't have any personal information. So only the people who have permission can go in the back end and look at that personal data. You can also do things where there's a functionality that they've kind of just recently added around synced tables. So what you can do there is you can sync out the information in your main database into a view and just show that to people. And all people can't play with the data, they can just view it. So that's some of the things you can do. just while you're there, somebody asked, can you download a CSV? There you go. You literally click on it. There's 3 buttons there, and you click download CSV. You can download the data.
Yeah, I think the question was specifically whether you could download it and then re-import it somewhere else. So,
yeah. So you can download the data, and it'll come in the structure that it is. You can put that into Google Sheets, or you can put that into Flourish, or you can put that into whatever you want to use it for. If you already have data, again, you can import that in a CSV as well. You can import that straight into Airtable. And if you did that and it was in a CSV format, Airtable would ask you, do you want your tables to look like this data? So basically, if you already have a kind of bit of a structure of a CRM and you don't want to use ours as a template, you can just kind of import that as a CSV and it will kind of self-populate. You might have to do a bit of playing around with the field types, but it does allow you to do that.
Coolio. Another question about the forms. About if you build forms, can you show data from more than one table to input it? So I think the answer is yes. So if you build a form to input data into one of those tables and it's already linked up to another one of the tables, when you are in the form view of it and you click to enter it, it'll bring up all the options from the other one. So if you add options into another table, maybe it's best to demonstrate this. Sorry, Tom. So just keep your screen shared, just to show how forms work, and that they literally mimic the input in the grid view.
Yeah. One of the I don't know whether this is part of the question, whether it's can you create a form which fills in data to multiple tables? No, you can't do that, or not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, it's more, the question is phrased around showing data from more than one table. So for example, if you go to...
Can you see that?
Yeah.
So people here is, so you can, this is built from the people table. You've got first name, surname, etc., postcode. And over here on the left hand side, you've got a load of fields, which, if you can see that, means it's a linked field. So if you did that and I added that in, that would mean that that's pulling information or adding from a different table, which is a partners and funders table.
I'll tell you what, Tom, can you click the share form thing and just drop a link in the chat? We'll see what happens.
Yeah. You see there, you can restrict it with a password and an email domain, which is what I was talking about earlier on.
So that link now that's just gone in the chat essentially is a link to a form that you could share publicly, and if people fill it in, it will populate the people bit.
And it'll basically look like, yeah, I'll have to share a different tab actually. It'll basically look like, make sure I get the right insert people. There we go. That's a form that will come up, and again you can add kind of branding in here. You can put different logos and things to make it a little bit nicer. Again, what I would say is it does what it should do, which is get data in a nice structured way. If you want a lovely, beautiful form, which is lovely looking and you can do everything with, again, Airtable doesn't do that, but what you can do is Airtable does sync with a few different kind of form specific products. So I think I'm trying to remember which ones it syncs with, but there's a few that are specifically built for creating forms, and you can basically use them with Airtable to get the information into Airtable via that. On mute, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Still can't get used to this digital technology. It's linked to a question from Bethia actually about whether Airtable integrates with tools like Typeform, and I think
yes, there we go, Typeform.
Yeah.
Just
so we've got a bit of time left, just shy of 10 minutes. What's interesting is there's some interesting use cases. Thank you to everyone who's been posting, Alice, Dulcie, Matt, and everyone's been contributing other links where you can find out about how people are using Airtable. We do have a bit of time left if there are more questions, either specifically about Airtable as a tool to build stuff or more specifically around how we've built the CRM. So fire away, otherwise we'll just keep chuntering away.
I think we're there.
Okay. Interesting to give you a sense of some of the people that have adopted it and having a bit of a play with it. Some of them are very localized community organizations that are trying to collect data in a standardized way that makes sense to all their funders. So, for example, there's an organization in Sheffield that's having a look at it and was interested in how funders' requirements could be accommodated or attached and linked to this. So they kind of took our starting point and was like, well, how can we then map outcomes and activities against particular funder requirements? And that's one use. There's another conversation with a local authority actually in their kind of community teams that are out and about on the ground, and how they could use this to collect stuff quickly and easily, particularly through mobile technology, because they were out and about. So something else to mention about Airtable is it's got a pretty decent app, particularly for like the forms stuff. So you could quickly collect information from people either on a doorstep or in other settings. Tricky, I appreciate, given COVID, but there are people doing face-to-face work still. So they're the kind of things people are interested in, and it's been interesting to do that. So we are trying to learn from how different people are using it, so that we can kind of create a bit of a case study bank, really.
Few more questions and things in. So somebody's asked, I think it was Alice, have you managed to link it with MailChimp? So last I checked, there wasn't a direct integration between MailChimp and Airtable. There is an opportunity to use something called Zapier, which there's a lot of use of Zapier at the moment about kind of linking between apps. It does work. You can link MailChimp and Airtable via Zapier. If you're going to use that a lot, then Zapier will cost you. It will cost you about £20 a month just for the amount of things that you're going to do. But if you want to just play with it and see if it does work, you can do that for free. There's more and more things coming online, which there's direct integrations between Airtable and other things. But at the moment, I think last I checked, there wasn't a direct integration between MailChimp and that. So another couple of questions. So we work with a little school daily attendance to events where Airtable allows us to do that. So I think so, yeah. That's one of the main purposes of what we've used this for was, if you're in an event and you want to collect some information, having it structured, we'll do that. Mac kind of says, does this feel more like a solution for folks at a time rich but money poor? I don't know. I think, I don't know. I'll ask that to you, Tom. What do you think?
Thanks. I quite like that question. And I think to a certain extent, or superficially, yes, but I'd also argue that the time invested in getting the the data structure right, saves a lot of headaches in the longer time horizon. And it's not necessarily about, I mean, Tom and I, although we're used to Airtable, it took us less than a day to kind of muck about with stuff. And I think by taking that time in teams or across an organization just to think about it and what its purpose is, yeah, it does take a bit of time, but I do think that's probably worth it and help you spec out the real legwork, and say you do farm it out to another organization or another solution. I would say that it would still serve you time in the longer term.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that we did it when used Airtable was it is quite scalable. You can make it quite big and quite weighty if you want to, but you don't need to. And it's kind of all about understanding your own use case. I mean, I use, just as an aside, I use Airtable as my kind of time tracking tool. So I've integrated it with my Google Calendar, and every time something pops into my Google Calendar, it pops up in Airtable. And I basically just kind of track my time that way. So you can use it in multiple different ways. That might be just another kind of slight use case. Not selling Airtable, but I think it does offer some really good things for people to play around with, get used to, and then go from there, really.
And I think in a much broader sense, I think there's a new question just popped in. Did we answer the question about Airtable and suitability for use with Typeform? Yes, you can integrate the two so that Typeform is your data entry way in. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I think for me, interestingly, just before this, I was listening to the talk on the leveraging data insights to better support users with Charlotte and Iz from Carefree. And I think they were speaking more broadly about no-code tools. And I think, although we happen to have used Airtable for this, I think this, I suppose, listening to their talk made me realize that it's kind of, maybe the message is about doing recce's for stuff, using things that are readily available and integratable can save a lot of time, and doesn't necessarily have to replace what you have in the first instance. It can just be a way of testing the water with what you might want in your existing thing or what you might want from a new thing. In my view, you can actually use these things as the endpoint too. But yeah, it was interesting building on that, because there's CRMs as a thing and a tool, but there's also like the mechanisms by which you can make that thing happen, and Airtable is one of those. It is not a CRM in its own right, it's just a free and easy way to start thinking about it, and which is why we did that. So yeah, we've got a minute left, and I know they're quite hot on timing, so I'm going to be quiet, see what happens. But thank you so much for listening to us.
Yeah,
useful.
Thank you very much. Yeah, okay. As I said, the link's there. Play with it. If you break it, get another copy. That's fine. And if you do want to have a chat with us, and if you do use it and find it really useful, even if you go on and use something else, both me and Tom would love to basically hear about it, because we're just interested in how people use it, what they use it for, and does it develop their data skills? Does it and their organizations' desire to use data better, which is what it was all about in the end.
Thanks.
Super. Thank you.